I never thought the day would come when I would feel more invisible under my own roof than I did standing alone on a busy city street. My name is Ethan Mercer, and that night in Austin, the people I once trusted most turned on me without a second thought. The living room was bathed in the harsh, clinical glow of an LED chandelier, its cool light doing nothing to warm my sister's icy glare. Harper, just 23 and already a rising star on streaming platforms, sat cross-legged on the plush rug, her smartphone rigged to a ring light that suddenly sputtered and dimmed. She had just hit 100,000 subscribers, a milestone, she'd called it, and now her joyous chatter stuttered as the video buffer wheel spun. I stood in the doorway holding a mug of leftover herbal tea, barely lukewarm, and said nothing. I didn't need to. As soon as the live stream froze and the chat window flooded with confusion, Harper's expression shifted from triumph to accusation. "Why do you always show up at the worst possible moment?" she hissed, voice rife with contempt. "You suck every ounce of good energy out of this house." I took a slow breath, nodding mutely, because I had no words to refute the absurdity. I had driven 2 hours that evening from my cramped apartment, so I could surprise her. I had wrapped her gift, a framed photo from our childhood, thinking it might cheer her on this milestone. Instead, she blamed me for a live stream glitch. Our mother, Lydia, rose from the velvet sofa as though she were wiping away some unacceptable stain. "He's right," she declared with a cold, flat certainty. "Every time Harper nears triumph, you wreck it. You drain us all." My heart pounded, and behind me I heard the soft click of my father's reading glasses as he pinched the bridge of his nose and turned away, unable or unwilling to meet my eyes. No one remarked on how Harper's own clumsy chord arrangement must have caused the dropout. No one asked why a 2-hour drive by my roommate's ancient car should bear the blame for her professional setup. They simply accepted her accusation, and I, their elder son, became public enemy number 1. I was not Ethan. I was that. You. Always. Never. Words thrown like knives. I retreated without a sound toward the hallway, passing the kitchen with its white marble countertop and untouched afternoon coffee still cooling. At the end of that dimly lit corridor was a small guest bedroom, the one rental they'd offered me last year when I lost my marketing job and had nowhere else to go. The door creaked like a rusty hinge as I pushed it open, letting it close softly behind me. Inside, the carpet smelled faintly of mildew, and the single bed sagged under an uninviting quilt. I set my tea down on the small nightstand, my fingers lingering on its chipped ceramic surface. Somewhere beyond the wall, my family's voices had fallen to murmurs, but I no longer registered their tones. I was already checking out. I opened the drawer of the mismatched dresser and pulled out an old canvas backpack I'd carried through college in Seattle. Using a flashlight app on my phone, I packed 3 sets of clothes, enough for a few nights, my essential medications, a phone charger, wallet, and a worn notebook whose pages were yellowed and frayed. I left behind framed portraits, scattered photographs, and souvenirs of birthdays and graduations because I could not bear reminders of a family that had erased me. By the time I closed the zipper, my hands were steady. I left the gift I had bought for Harper on the dresser, its ribbon untied, its promise broken. I slipped on my jacket, paused at the door, and looked back at the dim room that had sheltered me from a colder world. Then I walked out, leaving no note, no plea, simply the echo of a man who still carried hope as fragile as old parchment. I walked 5 blocks to the nearest bus stop under the flickering glow of a fluorescent street lamp. The concrete was cracked, and leaks from the gutter mirrored the way my heart felt, fractured. I bought a granola bar and a bottle of spring water from a corner store, items chosen not for nourishment but to calm trembling nerves. I asked the cashier if the last night bus to San Antonio was running. He shrugged. If traffic's light, could be here in 10 minutes. No kindness in his tone, no attempt at reassurance. I sat on a cold metal bench, my backpack between my feet, as if it were a lifeline. The live oak trees that lined the street cast shifting shadows, and I tried to focus on their gentle sway rather than the whirl of betrayal still spinning in my head. When the bus arrived, I boarded without looking back. No one called after me, no one wondered where I went. I had become a ghost in my own story. As the city lights blurred past the window, I pressed my forehead against the cool glass and forced myself to keep my eyes open. The bus hummed onward, and somewhere between midnight and the promise of dawn, I realized that I no longer belonged to the Mercer household. They had scrubbed my presence from their lives, and now I would write a new chapter, one that began with the ache of loss, but would eventually lead me to reclaim everything they tried to erase. I stepped off the bus into a late-night haze that felt both foreign and strangely welcoming. The air in San Antonio carried a mild warmth, a stark contrast to the sterile chill of my sister's living room glow. I stood under a flickering street lamp, my backpack heavy against my shoulders, like a familiar burden I could not yet set down. Around me, silhouettes drifted by, street cleaners pushing their carts, a lone biker tracing the curb, each absorbed in their own world. No one spared me a glance. In that moment, anonymity became a cloak of comfort. My first destination was a budget motel I had scouted online while still on the bus. The reviews had been sparse, but sufficient. Clean enough, no frills, safe. I followed GPS directions that led me down quiet residential blocks until I found the neon sign hanging crooked over a peeling facade. Riverview Lodge, weekly rates. Available. Inside, a middle-aged clerk with greying hair studied me without expression before asking, "Cash or card?" in a voice flat as concrete. I counted out exactly $217 in cash, my last reserve after covering the bus fare, and placed it on the counter with deliberate slowness. He took it without comment, slid me a paper keycard labelled Room 105, and nodded toward a corridor illuminated by wavering incandescent bulbs. The room was modest, a twin bed with a floral quilt that felt scratchy on my fingertips, an old television tucked into an alcove, and a small window overlooking an empty parking lot. The carpet felt rough under my bare feet. I set my bag down and surveyed the sparse furnishings. A single lamp buzzed when I switched it on, casting jagged shadows on the water-stained ceiling. At 2 a.m., the world beyond those walls was asleep, but I could not shut off the relentless hum of thoughts racing through my mind. I poured myself a glass of lukewarm water from the plastic pitcher on the nightstand and sank onto the edge of the bed. In the dim glow, the outlines of my belongings looked foreign. The worn notebook I had carried since college, its cover peeled at the corners. The neatly folded clothes I had chosen because they were easy to wash and quick to dry. My phone charger, already unplugged from the motel's outlet. For a moment, isolation threatened to swallow me whole. I pressed my hands to my temples as if I could physically hold my thoughts in place. Then, a small spark of determination flickered. I had not come this far to hide from life. I needed a plan, something concrete to grasp at, something that reminded me of my worth outside the Mercer household's suffocating shadow. I pulled out my phone and logged into LearnLink, a tutoring platform I had used briefly during my graduate years before corporate layoffs derailed my career. My profile was dormant, saved under my real name, Ethan Mercer, Education Specialist. The university listing read University of Washington, English Literature. I tapped Edit Profile and began rewriting every line to reflect my current situation. Passionate tutor with over 5 years of experience helping students master reading comprehension and essay writing. Proven track record of raising SAT reading scores by over 200 points, flexible scheduling, and personalized lesson plans. My fingers hovered over the Upload Photo button. The last picture on my phone was dated nearly a year ago, a candid shot of me in a coffee shop, headphones on, scribbling notes in my notebook. I selected it and adjusted the crop until only my face remained, eyes steady, mouth set in a faint, determined line. Beneath it, I crafted a short bio. I believe in teaching not just facts, but understanding, empowering students to own their learning journey. I saved the changes and waited for the confirmation banner to pop up. Profile updated successfully. It was almost 3 a.m. when I finally shut off the bedside lamp. Sleep felt out of reach, but I closed my eyes and let exhaustion wash over me. I dreamt of empty rooms and unanswered messages, then of chalkboards lined with half-erased equations and paragraphs waiting to be dissected. I woke at 7 a.m. to the sound of wind chimes and a distant train horn. The city was stirring. I slipped into my sneakers, grabbed a granola bar from my bag, and walked 2 blocks to the public library where I'd arranged my first session. Inside, the librarian directed me to a computer station that I could reserve for a couple of hours. I settled at one of the sleek, modern desks and checked my notifications. There it was. A message from Ms. Delgado, mother of a high school junior. My daughter needs help with college essays. Can you begin tomorrow afternoon? I exhaled slowly, feeling the tension in my chest ease for the first time in weeks. I clicked accept. It was my first real acknowledgement that I could step out of my sister's shadow and into a space of my own making. I spent the rest of the morning drafting lesson outlines, gathering sample prompts, and reviewing literature analysis techniques. Each click, each saved document, was a small act of reclaiming my identity. The buzzing of the library lights faded into background hum as I lost myself in work that mattered. That night, back in room 105, I laid out my tutoring materials on the desk, my phone beside them. The same lamp cast soft light on my notes, thesis statements versus topic sentences, textual annotation strategies, metaphor identification exercises. A quiet pride warmed me more effectively than any family glow ever had. I folded my hands, stared at the organized sheets, and realized I had already begun to rebuild. My life was no longer defined by the Mercer name, but by the value I created for others. And that was a truth no one could erase. Morning light filtered through the drawn curtains of room 105, gilding the peeling wallpaper with a tentative glow. I blinked awake, to the distant rumble of traffic, the gentle hum of city life reminding me that I was no longer hiding behind closed Mercer doors. Sitting up on the scratchy quilt, I reached for my notebook, its pages scuffed where I had scribbled lesson plans and notes. Today was my first evening tutoring session with Ms. Delgado's daughter, Marisol, and I wanted every detail lined up: essay prompts, brainstorming exercises, confidence-building pep talks. I ran a hand through my hair, straightened the collar of my shirt, and felt a flicker of excitement I hadn't known in months. The motel's coffee machine wheezed in the lobby as I poured a cup of dark roast into a styrofoam cup. I slipped 2 creamer pods into my backpack, along with a fresh granola bar and a copy of The Great Gatsby I had borrowed from the library. Something about Fitzgerald's prose always helped students see how language could breathe emotion and context into sentences. Outside, the morning air carried the scent of freshly mown grass from the park across the street, a small comfort after weeks of stale motel scents and second-hand emotions. I took a long sip of coffee, closing my eyes as the warmth spread through me, and set off toward the Delgado residence. The neighborhood was quiet, lined with low brick homes and tidy lawns where sprinklers hissed in rhythmic pulses. I arrived at 1620 Maple Avenue 5 minutes early and rang the bell. Marisol's mother answered, her expression a blend of relief and hope. "Thank you for coming," she said, stepping aside to let me in. Inside, the living room was bright and welcoming, cream-colored walls adorned with framed family photos, a plush sofa, and a small desk by the window. Sunlight streamed through lace curtains, illuminating potted plants and stacks of college brochures on a side table. Everything felt intentional, designed to encourage, unlike the silent reproach of my own childhood home. Marisol emerged from an adjoining hallway clutching her backpack. She looked shy, soft brown hair pulled into a ponytail, eyes downcast. "Hi, I'm Ethan," I said, extending a hand. She gave a tentative smile and shook it. I led her to the desk and invited her to sit. "So," I began, "essay topics can feel overwhelming, but they're really just invitations to tell your story. What's something you care about deeply?" She hesitated, then brightened a bit.
I love photography. I think it's a way to capture moments nobody else sees." I nodded. "Perfect."
Let's start there. Over the next 2 hours, we built an outline. An introduction that painted a vivid scene of her grandmother's garden at dawn, body paragraphs exploring the connection between light and emotion, and a conclusion that tied her artistic vision back to her personal growth. I showed her how to weave sensory details, the damp earth under her sneakers, the golden rays filtering through petals, into her opening paragraph. She wrote with focus, pausing occasionally to ask, "Is this too much detail?" I laughed gently. "Too much? Ever? You're giving your readers something to feel, not just read." When the session ended, her mother handed me $45 in cash, pressed between a sticky note. "With gratitude, Ms.
Delgado. I tucked it into my pocket, but felt the weight of something far greater than money. Validation. By the time I walked back to the motel, dusk had begun its slow descent, painting the sky in lavender and amber.
I paused at a street vendor's cart, bought a soda, and leaned against a lamp post, watching streetlights flicker on. The city felt alive with possibility, as if every corner held a chance for reinvention. Back in my room, I reviewed Marisol's draft under the glow of the shaky desk lamp. Her prose was earnest and raw, but she needed help tightening her thesis and polishing transitions. I grabbed a pen and marked notes in the margins. Clarify this shift. Consider substituting glimmer for shine. Expand on emotional reaction here. Each correction reminded me of the countless lessons I had taught myself, how to craft words that resonated, how to structure arguments so they flowed like water. I realized that in teaching others, I was reaffirming my own expertise. Just as I was about to close my notebook, my phone buzzed with a notification from LearnLink. A new request from Mr. Khan, father of a sophomore struggling with algebra. My chest tightened with a mixture of nerves and determination. Algebra was my weakest subject, but I had taught it before, and I knew I could tackle quadratic equations again. I replied, proposing a session for the next morning at the community center's study hall. My fingers hovered over send, then tapped. Another opportunity, another step forward. I lay back on the stiff bed, staring at the cracked ceiling as streetlights filtered through the window. I thought of the Mercer house, of Harper's cold glare, of Lydia's dismissive words. They had tried to make me disappear, to frame me as an ungrateful shadow. But here, in the gentle glow of library lamps and living room desks, I was something else, a mentor, a guide, a steady hand in someone's moment of uncertainty. I closed my eyes and let the realization sink in. I was building a new home, one built on knowledge, compassion, and the tangible proof of my own worth. And with every student I helped, I was rewriting the narrative I had once thought was finished. I arrived at the community center study hall just before noon, carrying my worn backpack and a stack of fresh worksheets. The long corridor smelled faintly of cleaning solution, and the fluorescent lights hummed overhead as I stepped inside the room where I was to meet Mr. Khan's son, Ravi, a sophomore grappling with the mysteries of algebra. He sat at a rectangular table, his dark hair falling into his eyes as he stared at a sheet filled with quadratic equations. When I introduced myself, he looked up, visibly tense. "I've never been good at math," he admitted in a quiet voice. "My grades are tanking." I nodded, remembering the anxiety that once gripped me in math class. "Let's start slowly," I said, offering a warm smile. "Algebra can feel like a foreign language. Let's learn to translate." I wrote a simple example on the whiteboard. X squared plus 3x minus 4 equals 0. Then I guided Ravi through the process of factoring, showing him how to break the expression into x plus 4, x minus 1 equals 0. As his frown transformed into curiosity, I explained that solving for x is like asking, which numbers make this true? He copied each step, pausing to ask, "So you're finding what makes the
equation balance?" I confirmed it with a nod. Exactly. Balance is key. By the end of our 90-minute session, Ravi had successfully solved 3 of 4 practice problems on his own. His eyes brightened as he realized he could do more than he believed.
"I get it now," he said, with a shy grin. His mother, waiting in the lobby, slipped me $40 in cash and offered heartfelt thanks. As I walked back outside, the late afternoon sun cast soft shadows across the pavement. I paused to look at the stack of bills in my hand. More than just money. It was evidence that my skills mattered, that I belonged somewhere. That evening, back in room 105, I spread my tutoring notes across the small desk and reviewed Ravi's progress. I felt a surge of pride mixed with relief. For the first time in months, I had woken up with purpose. I washed my face in the grimy bathroom sink. Warm water sputtered from the faucet, and then settled into the cracked vinyl armchair facing the window. I opened my laptop and saw a notification. LearnLink had matched me with a new student, an 11th grader named Ariana preparing for her ACT. I clicked Accept without hesitation. Over the next 2 days, I balanced algebra sessions with literature reviews and essay workshops. With each lesson, I refined my teaching techniques and learned to tailor explanations to different learning styles. My confidence grew alongside my students' achievements. Marisol submitted a compelling draft on social justice. Ravi solved systems of equations with newfound ease, and now Ariana was ready to tackle science reasoning questions. I took meticulous notes after every class: what worked, what needed improvement, where I could offer additional examples. The motel room's walls, once blank and oppressive, began to feel like a sanctuary where my purpose was mapped out in ink and typed documents. On a quiet Saturday afternoon, I ventured into downtown San Antonio to clear my mind. I wandered along the river walk, watching paddle boats glide through emerald water and listening to distant guitar chords from street musicians. Couples strolled hand in hand, families shared laughter on patio tables, and tourists snapped photos of vibrant tiles. The world continued in its rhythms, unaware of the personal revolution unfolding in room 105. I found a bench overlooking the river and pulled my notebook from my backpack. Flipping to a blank page, I began jotting ideas for a personal blog, an online space where I could share teaching tips, motivational reflections, and stories of student breakthroughs. I paused, realizing that telling my own story might reach those who felt unseen. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, I made my way back, thoughts buzzing with possibility. When I reached the motel, I checked my phone and discovered an unexpected message, an email from a small publication called Educator's Journal, asking if I would pen an article about my tutoring approach and the role of empathy in student success. My fingers trembled as I read the invitation, an invitation to step into the light rather than remain hidden. I stared at the screen, heart pounding, and felt the familiar warmth of hope blossom in my chest. That night, I drafted a response accepting their offer, then sat back and surveyed the room. The single lamp illuminated the mottled walls, but my eyes settled on the organized chaos of my teaching materials. Each lined-up worksheet, each annotated page, each carefully folded lesson plan testified to countless hours of dedication. In the silence, I acknowledged that I was no longer defined by my family's rejection, but by the tangible impact I was making on others' lives. For the first time, I saw room 105 not as a temporary refuge, but as the headquarters of my new beginning, where knowledge, compassion, and integrity would chart the path forward. The next morning, I awoke before sunrise. A pale grey glow seeped around the edges of the curtains, and I lay in bed for a few moments, simply listening to the distant rumble of early traffic. Room 105 had become so familiar that the creak of its floorboards felt like an old friend's greeting. Yet I had no desire to linger beneath those thin sheets. I swung my legs over the edge of the bed, planted my feet on the threadbare carpet, and reached for my phone. There, nestled among routine notifications, was a message that made my heart stutter. "Ethan, are you awake? I found something you need to see." It was from Madeline Ruiz, my best friend from graduate school, a project manager now based in Denver, who had always believed in my teaching talent, even when I doubted myself. I tapped the message and saw an attachment, a PDF of an online course syllabus titled Mastering the Written Word, From Sentences to Scholarships. The course outline and sample handouts were nearly identical to the resources I had crafted and shared. Privately on LearnLink, my breath caught in my throat. I forwarded everything to myself, then called Madeline. Her voice was brisk but low. "I was researching potential partners for my new project management role," she explained, "and I stumbled upon this startup called Prose Path Academy. Their branding and materials looked eerily familiar, so I searched for Mercer in Google Drive references and, well, here we are." She paused. "I'm sorry, Ethan. I know this is hard." A knot tightened in my chest. Prose Path Academy's materials, developed by some ambitious entrepreneur, had co-opted my entire approach to teaching writing. Every hand-drawn diagram, every step-by-step framework, even my personal three-point revision method was there under someone else's name. I thanked Madeline quietly, ending the call before my voice cracked. I sat down at the small desk by the window, gathering courage. The desk lamp offered a feeble circle of illumination, but my mind was racing. I opened my laptop and navigated to the Prose Path Academy website. At the top of their homepage was a banner, "Revolutionize Your Writing, Proven Strategies for College Success." Below it, 4 modules gleamed with slick branding. 1. Sentence Structure Simplified. 2. Paragraph Power Plays 3. Thesis Craft and Creation 4. Scholarship Application Essentials. My materials had been organized in exactly that sequence. The sample PDF for Paragraph Power Plays was practically verbatim from my own handouts, except their margin notes replaced my handwriting with generic corporate icons. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I had already begun rebuilding my life as a tutor, carving out a new identity. But this theft felt personal, an attempt to steal not just my work but my very essence as an educator. I refused to be a victim yet again. I opened a clean document and began drafting an email to Prose Path Academy's contact address. I carefully set my tone to firm civility. Subject: Course. Material Ownership Inquiry. Dear Prose Path team, my name is Ethan Mercer. I am the original creator of the teaching resources featured under the Prose Path Academy curriculum. Before your organization's launch, I developed and used identical materials through LearnLink, with documented timestamps and student testimonials. I am not requesting financial compensation at this time. I only ask that you acknowledge my authorship and either remove the duplicated content or formally license it from me. I look forward to your prompt response. Sincerely, Ethan Mercer, Education Specialist. I paused and reread each line, ensuring clarity and professionalism. Then I hit send. In that moment, I felt a surge of agency. The silent despair of my family home was replaced by a proactive stand for my own work. The rest of the morning passed in a haze of anticipation. I worked through lesson plans for Ariana's ACT session and formatted notes for an upcoming piece I intended to submit to Educator's Journal. My laptop pinged with the email I had sent, now marked Read, and I sat up straight. Already their server had registered my inquiry. By midday, I received a brief automated reply. Thank you for contacting ProsPath Academy. We will respond to your inquiry within 7 business days. My heart sank slightly at the standard timeline, but the fact that they had acknowledged me felt like a small victory. That afternoon, I met with Ariana at the community center's study lounge. As I guided her through science reasoning practice, noting key logic shortcuts and visualization techniques, I felt a growing sense of purpose. Each question she answered correctly reminded me that my expertise was irreplaceable regardless of who tried to appropriate it. When the session ended, Ariana's mother, Mrs. Chen, handed me a check for $50, my highest single-session payout so far. I folded it carefully and slipped it into my notebook, alongside Madeline's forwarded PDF. I glanced down at my scrawled reminder. Follow up with ProsPath, Day 1. Written in bold ink. Back at the motel, I prepared a folder labeled Mercer Originals and copied my entire digital archive onto a portable hard drive. I printed out time-stamped PDF exports of my LearnLink resources, old email confirmations, and Madeline's evidence. I tucked everything into the folder like ammunition for an upcoming battle. As dusk fell, I placed the folder on the desk lamp's pool of light, the documents casting long shadows across the motel wall. The flickering bulb illuminated each page, a testament to countless nights spent refining and perfecting my teaching craft. I closed the folder with a determined click, leaned back in my chair, and allowed myself a moment of quiet satisfaction. For the first time in my life, I was not just surviving, I was actively defending my own narrative. And with that conviction burning bright, I was ready for whatever came next. Within 24 hours of sending my inquiry to ProsPath Academy, I felt the familiar hum of anticipation in my chest. I woke early, before the wan light crept through the motel's thin curtains, and brewed a pot of instant coffee. As steam curled around my fingers, I opened my laptop and reviewed my Mercer Originals folder one more time, ensuring that every time-stamped file, every forwarded email from Madeline, and every LearnLink confirmation was neatly organized. The crisp printouts of my syllabi caught the morning light, their edges crisp and unbowed as if daring anyone to question their provenance. I drafted a carefully worded follow-up email to ProsPath, a polite reminder that 7 business days still lay ahead before legal escalation, and an offer to discuss a licensing arrangement that honored my ongoing work helping students. With one last deep breath, I clicked send and closed my laptop, feeling the weight of my own resolve settle around me like a protective cloak. Later that afternoon, I made my way to a small law office I had researched online, Reed and Thompson Intellectual Property, located in a quiet strip of oak-lined streets near downtown. The receptionist directed me to a narrow conference room where I met Ms. Eleanor Reeves, a seasoned attorney with salt-and-pepper hair and a no-nonsense demeanor. After I laid out my materials, printed course outlines, email chains, LearnLink records, she leaned back in her leather chair and steepled her fingers. "Your case is clear," she said in measured tones. "You have documented proof of ownership and public acknowledgement via your LearnLink profile and the timestamps on your files. ProsPath's use of identical content is an infringement under federal copyright law." She paused and looked me squarely in the eye. "I recommend we prepare a formal cease and desist letter, and if they do not comply within 14 days, we file a complaint with the U.S. Copyright Office and pursue statutory damages." My heart pounded with a blend of relief, and cautious optimism. I nodded, grateful that my instincts had led me here to a professional who could translate my evidence into legal protection. Back in room 105, I felt the air vibrate with possibility. I drafted the cease and desist letter under Ms. Reeves's guidance, using clear, legal language that outlined my exclusive rights to the Mastering the Written Word curriculum, the Paragraph Power Plays module, and the 3-point revision method. I attached Exhibits A through C, my original, drafts with date stamps, then signed and sent the letter via certified mail. That evening, as I waited for the return receipt, I turned my attention to my teaching work. I logged into LearnLink and updated my profile banner with a photo of me at the whiteboard, marker in hand, smiling confidently. Underneath, I added a brief note. Official creator of the Mastering the Written Word curriculum, celebrating 5 years of helping students succeed. It was a small act, but it felt like reclaiming my name in public view. Just before midnight, I heard a soft knock at my motel door. My heart leapt as I opened it to find a plain white envelope wedged under the frame. Inside was the green return receipt card, stamped received, with a scribbled date from ProsePath's headquarters. They had it. I exhaled, leaning against the doorframe, as gravity pulled years of self-doubt from my shoulders. In that moment, the motel room felt less like a temporary refuge and more like command central for my reclaimed life. I slipped the receipt into my notebook alongside the check from Mariana's mother and Ravi's session payment and taped it to the wall above my desk lamp. I gazed at the growing mosaic of proof, light reflecting off printed papers, digital screens, and personal mementos, all converging into a single truth. I was not a shadow, nor a burden, nor an inconvenience. I was Ethan Mercer, educator and creator, and with every document pinned to that creeping motel wall, I stood taller than I ever had under the hum of my own family's chandelier. The morning sun sliced through the cracked slats of the blinds as I woke in room 105, refreshed by my small victory. The green return receipt card from ProsePath hung on the wall beside my grandmother's faded portrait, proof that my voice had reached beyond the flickering bulb. My chest swelled with purpose as I brewed a cup of tea, careful to let the tea bag steep just long enough. I settled at the desk, opened my laptop, and drafted a quick update to Educator's Journal, letting them know about recent developments and my pending article. Then I logged into my personal blog draft, tentatively titled From Shadow to Spotlight, and wrote the first paragraph. I spent years feeling erased, accused, and undervalued under the same roof that should have sheltered me. Today, as an independent educator, I reclaim not only my work, but my right to be seen. Satisfied with the opening, I switched gears to my next tutoring session, a virtual meeting with Mr. D'Souza's daughter Layla, who was preparing for the PSAT. I reviewed her emailed practice test scores, subpar in math but promising in reading, and tailored a 2-hour lesson focusing on logic puzzles and data interpretation. My day unfolded in blocks: 1 hour of blogging, 2 hours of tutoring via video call, an afternoon at the library researching IP case studies, and then an early evening session with Ms. Delgado's younger son, Mateo, working on his geometry proofs. Each successful session brought fresh affirmations. Layla texted, "Your tips made these questions click," and Mateo emailed a selfie of his completed proof, beaming. By late afternoon, the anxiety that once knotted my stomach had dissolved into steady confidence. I packed my bag and headed to the San Antonio Public Library to access a private study room reserved for legal research. I had to prepare for the possibility that ProsPath's attorneys might push back. Inside the hushed room, I spread out my files, the cease and desist letter, my original course materials, and printed legal references Ms. Reeves had recommended. I made margin notes on potential counter-arguments, fair use, transformative content, and flagged sections of the U.S. Copyright Act that underpinned my claim. Hours passed as I annotated and organized my binder. When I stepped back into the late afternoon sun, the sky had softened to pastel hues. I realized my stomach was empty, so I treated myself to a tamale from a nearby food cart. As I walked back toward the motel, each bite reminded me that I deserved nourishment in food, in work, and in recognition. I glanced down at my phone, half expecting news from ProsPath, but only saw a reminder. Finalize Educator's Journal Draft. I smiled and tapped the notification, eager to translate my experiences into an article that might inspire others. That evening, under the buzzing desk lamp, I pored over my article draft. I described the shock of discovering my stolen materials, the loneliness of striking out on my own, and the relief of legal validation. I quoted Ms. Reeves. Your ownership is not just a matter of files and dates. It's a declaration of your professional identity. Then I shifted tone, offering practical advice. Maintain detailed records of creation dates, back up your work, and never underestimate the power of a polite but firm inquiry. I closed the laptop at 10 p.m., printed a copy for my binder, and pinned a sticky note on the screen. Submit Friday. Just as I was about to turn in for the night, my phone buzzed with an email. From Reed and Thompson, ProsPath Academy's counsel had requested a meeting to discuss licensing terms. My heart leapt. They were taking me seriously. I replied within minutes, proposing Wednesday at 10 a.m. at their offices downtown. I tapped send and leaned back, letting a grin spread across my face. For the first time I felt empowered not only as a tutor, but as a creator whose work commanded respect. I curled under the scratchy quilt, eyes tracing the mottled ceiling. The room no longer felt like a temporary holdout. It was my action center, where legal documents, lesson plans, and personal reflections converged into a life I had rebuilt on my own terms. As sleep claimed me, I drifted into dreams of chalkboards cleared of doubt, whiteboards filled with confident diagrams, and a future unshakable in its promise. There, in the quiet darkness, I finally knew I was exactly where I was meant to be. Wednesday morning broke clear and cool, a gentle breeze stirring the Spanish moss that draped the live oaks along Alamo Plaza. I arrived at the ProsPath Academy offices 15 minutes early, my heart fluttering like a caged bird, but steadied by the months of preparation that had brought me here. The building was a sleek glass and steel structure, its lobby spotless and modern. I checked in with the receptionist, who handed me a visitor badge, Ethan Mercer, and directed me to the third-floor conference room where the meeting would take place. As I rode the elevator up, I reviewed the materials in my mind, the cease and desist letter and its exhibits, the timeline of my original course development, the manifesto of curriculum ownership I had drafted under Ms. Reeves's guidance and Madeline's forwarded PDF proof. I pictured Ms. Eleanor Reeves's calm, authoritative presence. I envisioned the negotiation not as a confrontation, but as a fair sharing of credit, and potential collaboration. I pressed my palm to the cool metal wall of the elevator and tried to breathe evenly. The conference room door stood ajar, and inside I saw three figures seated around a polished mahogany table. One was a sharply dressed attorney, dark suit, crisp white shirt, silver tie, whose nameplate read Mr. Grant Whitman, Esquire. Beside him sat a woman in smart business casual attire, whose nameplate identified her as Ms. Larissa Green, Chief Content Officer of Prose Path Academy. A younger man observed from the side, laptop open, presumably a junior associate. I cleared my throat gently and stepped forward. Whitman looked up, nodded curtly, and gestured to the seat across from Green. "Mr. Mercer," he said, voice formal but not unfriendly, "thank you for coming." "Please, sit." I placed my portfolio on the table, documents neatly tabbed with coloured sticky notes, and offered each person a printed copy of the cease and desist letter. Green's eyes flicked over the exhibits as I introduced myself. "Thank you for meeting with me. As you know, I am the original creator of the Mastering the Written Word curriculum, which your materials mirror almost identically. My intent today is to discuss how we can resolve this matter fairly, whether by acknowledging my authorship, licensing my content, or establishing a partnership moving forward." Whitman cleared his throat. "Mr. Mercer, we have reviewed your claim and the documentation. We do not dispute the timeline of your work. However, we believe there may be overlap with pre-existing public domain frameworks and collaborative contributions within industry standards." He paused, allowing the implication to settle. They were prepared to argue that my methods were not wholly proprietary. Green leaned forward. "We value your work, Mr. Mercer, and we would like to explore a licensing agreement rather than litigation. We propose a revenue-sharing model where ProsePath pays you a percentage of course sales moving forward." I nodded, listening carefully. They were offering what sounded like a lifeline, but I had to consider whether it honored my past efforts. I asked, "What percentage were you considering?" Whitman consulted his notes. "We propose a royalty rate of 5% of net revenues for the first 2 years, with an option to review and adjust based on performance metrics." I took a breath. 5% felt modest given the identical nature of my content. I flipped to a tab in my portfolio, the draft licensing proposal DIBS. Reeves and I had prepared suggested a 15% royalty in perpetuity, reflecting the foundational nature of my materials. I tapped the proposal page and said, "I appreciate your offer. Given that these modules comprise the core of your curriculum, I would feel more comfortable with a royalty rate of 15% of net revenues, with annual reviews and clear usage guidelines. Additionally, I request formal credit in all course materials as original curriculum designer, Ethan Mercer." Green exchanged a glance with Whitman. The junior associate typed quickly. A moment of silence passed. Then Whitman replied, "We can agree to an initial royalty rate of 10% for the first year, then 15% thereafter, contingent upon meeting mutually agreed performance thresholds. We will include your credit on all relevant materials." I allowed myself a small nod. "That is acceptable, provided the agreement includes clear definitions of net revenues and minimum performance reports each quarter. And I would like a seat at the content review table for any substantial updates to ensure my intellectual property remains intact." Green smiled, warm relief in her expression. "Absolutely. We want to respect your ownership and maintain the integrity of the curriculum, We will draft the revised agreement accordingly." Whitman stood and extended his hand. "Thank you, Mr. Mercer. We will have a formal draft emailed to you by end of day Friday. Welcome aboard as Prose Path's licensed content partner." I shook his hand firmly, feeling the tension drain from my shoulders. I left the offices on a literal high, hands free of folders, mind buzzing with the reality that my work would be rightfully recognized and that I would benefit from its success. I paused on the sidewalk, sunlight glinting off my badge, and took in a deep breath of city air scented with jasmine from a nearby planter. This was not just a legal victory, it was the affirmation of my worth. That evening, back in room 105, I placed the meeting notes beside my laptop and drafted an email of gratitude to Ms. Reeves and Madeline. I updated my blog with a post titled "Negotiation Wins from Infringement to Partnership," sharing insights on asserting one's rights professionally. I closed my eyes for a moment, imagining the journey thus far, the cold glances of my family, the lonely bus rides, the musty motel nights, and each click that led me here. I opened my notebook and wrote across the top of a fresh page, "Ethan Mercer, Curriculum Partner at Prose Path Academy." Below it, I drew a simple timeline: discovery, legal action, negotiation, partnership. Each milestone marked not just procedural progress, but personal transformation. I paused and traced the ink with my fingertip, a tangible reminder that I had reclaimed my story. And as the motel lamp flickered its steady glow, I realized that the next chapter, one built on collaboration, respect, and continued growth, was just beginning. The dawn light washed in pale through the threadbare curtains as I stirred awake, a sense of anticipation already humming in my veins. Today marked my first official day as a licensed content partner with Prose Path Academy, and I intended to start by delivering value immediately. After a quick shower, warm water sputtered and then steadied. I dressed in a crisp collared shirt and jeans, tethering my laptop bag over one shoulder. Before stepping into the motel's lobby, I paused to survey the wall beside my desk. Pinned there were the signed licensing agreement summary, the green return receipt card, my grandmother's photograph, and a fresh, sticky note reading, "First.
Prose Path webinar. Prepare slides." I drew in a slow breath and left the room.
I arrived at a nearby cafe known for its reliably strong coffee and friendly baristas. Over a double latte, I opened my laptop and navigated to the Prose Path partner portal. The dashboard welcomed me with a banner, "Welcome, Ethan Mercer." Below it were notifications. "Webinar scheduled, Module 1 overview, next Tuesday at 7 p.m. And please upload revised slides by end of day." I sipped my coffee and reviewed the existing slide deck for Module 1, originally titled "Sentence Structure Simplified." The Prose Path design team had adapted my content into a sleek template, but several diagrams and examples felt impersonal. I downloaded the file and began customizing it, restoring my original hand-drawn flowchart that showed how to transform a run-on sentence into clear, concise statements, adding brief anecdotal notes in the margins about student breakthroughs, and embedding 2 of my most requested practice exercises. As I worked, library patrons filed in and out of the cafe, but I was focused on every detail: font sizes, color contrasts for accessibility, and the precise placement of my name beneath the webinar title. By midday, I finished the revisions and uploaded the slide deck. The portal confirmed receipt and an email pinged in my inbox. Slides approved by ProsPath design team. Thank you. I allowed myself a small smile of satisfaction. My work, once stolen and hidden, would now be shared with thousands under my own authorship. That afternoon, I switched gears to prepare talking points. I drafted an outline. 1. Introduction. Brief personal journey. From college tutor to licensed content creator. 2. Importance of sentence structure. Explaining why clarity and flow are foundational. 3. Key concepts, subject-verb agreement, clause boundaries and common pitfalls. 4. Interactive exercise, live rewriting of a complex sentence submitted by attendees. 5. Q&A, welcoming participant questions. I rehearsed each section aloud in the empty motel room, pacing between the bed and desk as if on a stage. My voice grew stronger with each run-through, the tremor of initial nerves replaced by controlled excitement. I timed myself, just under 30 minutes, leaving space for questions in a 1-hour slot. That evening, I logged into the webinar platform from a study room at the library. The virtual waiting room filled with attendee names, students, educators, and lifelong learners from across the country. At exactly 7 p.m., the host unmuted my microphone and introduced me. The screen shifted to my webcam feed, and I straightened my posture, offering a warm smile. "Hello, everyone," I began, voice steady. "I'm Ethan Mercer, original creator of the Sentence Structure Simplified module here at ProsPath Academy. Tonight, I'm thrilled to take you through the building blocks of powerful writing." I clicked to advance the slide, revealing my restored hand-drawn flowchart. The chat lit up with positive reactions, great visual, and loved the personal touch. As I spoke, I saw nods through attendee webcams and read encouraging comments. When I invited a volunteer to submit a convoluted sentence, a user named CuriousLearner_22 typed, "Despite the fact that the test was challenging, substantial improvement was necessary." I paused, smiled, and shared my screen to rewrite it live. Run on. "Despite the fact that the test was challenging, substantial improvement was necessary." Revised. "Although the test was challenging, I needed significant improvement." The participant's avatar lit up, and the chat erupted with applause. Emojis. My heart swelled with the familiar thrill of connection that I had missed for so long. An hour later, as the Q&A wound down, I shared my closing thoughts. Remember, clarity isn't about stripping away complexity. It's about aligning your words with your meaning so readers engage effortlessly. I thanked everyone, and the webinar ended.
To a flood of positive feedback.
Attendees rated the session 4.8 out of 5, with comments like, "Best writing webinar I've attended," floating in. I logged off and sat back, the library's fluorescent lights reflecting in my laptop screen. My phone buzzed with a new notification, an email from ProsPath's CEO offering me a contract to develop Module 3 next month. I stared at the message in awe. The journey that began with betrayal and erasure had come full circle. I was now an indispensable voice in a premier educational platform, guiding learners toward mastery and integrity. And as I packed up and stepped out into the cool night air, I felt more visible and more myself than ever before. The morning after my first ProsPath webinar dawned crisp and bright, as though the world itself recognized my new chapter and cheered me on. I rolled out of bed in room 105, stretched, and reached for my phone. Notifications from the webinar platform glowed with praise. Messages like, "Transformative session," and "You've reignited my passion for writing." My heart fluttered with gratitude as I read each one. Then I slipped on my sneakers and headed out for a brief sunrise walk along the river walk, carrying a small notebook in my coat pocket where I'd sketched early ideas for Module 3, focusing on thesis craft and creation. The river's surface shimmered gold in the dawn light, and when I paused at a quiet bench, I opened the notebook to that fresh page. I reviewed the outline, an engaging anecdote about finding clarity in an abandoned research journal, step-by-step deconstruction of strong thesis statements, and an interactive activity asking learners to craft a thesis from provided prompts. Filling in a few more bullet points, I felt the familiar surge of purpose. My grandmother's spirit, she had believed in my educational vision long before anyone else, seemed to smile down at me in every ripple of water. By 9 a.m. I was back at the cafe near the motel, coffee in hand, and drafting an email to Larissa Green and Grant Whitman. I thanked them for the webinar opportunity and proposed a tentative timeline for Module 3. Draft slides by the end of next week, a rehearsal webinar at the start of the following week, and a full session launch in 4 weeks. I emphasized my commitment to quality and collaboration, closing with, "I look forward to continuing our partnership and helping learners find their voice." With a decisive click, I hit send. The rest of the morning I spent at the San Antonio Public Library, alternating between research on rhetorical frameworks and reviewing student feedback from the webinar's follow-up survey. I noted recurring questions. Several attendees struggled with transitioning from broad ideas to concise thesis statements, and many desired examples drawn from diverse academic disciplines. I jotted down potential adjustments to my content, integrating examples from history, science, and even visual arts to demonstrate universal application. Later, I met with Ms. Delgado's son, Mateo, for an in-person geometry session at a corner coffee shop that offered free Wi-Fi. He arrived with a practiced smile, his notebook open to a page of proofs involving triangle congruence. I commended his progress and suggested we integrate writing exercises into his study routine, short reflections on each proof to deepen his conceptual understanding. As he wrote a brief paragraph on why side-angle-side congruence mattered in architectural design, I realized how teaching across subjects enriched my own practice and reinforced my belief in interdisciplinary learning. By early afternoon, I felt a pang of excitement and exhaustion in equal measure. My laptop dinged with a reply from Larissa. "Timeline approved. Let's make Module 3 our best yet." I grinned and closed my eyes for a moment, letting the satisfaction sink in. Then I organized my notes into a single document and headed back to the motel, stopping for a turkey sandwich to stave off hunger. In my room, I cleared the desk and laid out everything I needed: my notebook with sketches, a stack of research articles on thesis development, and 2 blank slide decks. I booted up my laptop and imported my content into the ProsePath template, starting with the module's title slide, Thesis Craft and Creation, Building Foundations for Academic Excellence. I followed with my revised introduction anecdote, drawing on my grandmother's unpublished journal entries, her reflections on teaching English to returning veterans in the 1950s. Embedding that personal story made the lesson feel intimate and authentic. Night approached as I finished the first 10 slides. I saved my work, printed a rough copy of the slide notes and taped them to the wall next to the green return receipt card, a growing shrine to every milestone. I realized how far I'd come, from an unacknowledged tutor hiding in a guest room to a recognized curriculum designer forging new learning pathways for hundreds of students. Before closing my laptop, I recorded a short voice memo summarizing my progress and reminding myself of tomorrow's goals. Complete draft slides 15 through 25, review thematic examples across 3 disciplines, and schedule a rehearsal with Larissa. As I drifted off to sleep that night, I felt a deep sense of fulfillment. My voice, once silenced by family and stolen by opportunists, now resonated across virtual classrooms and legal agreements alike. And in that quiet triumph, I knew I was exactly where I was meant to be, writing my own story slide by slide, thesis by thesis. I woke that morning with a sense of momentum humming through me. The pale sunlight filtered through the gaps in the curtains, drawing slanting lines across my desk where the draft slides for Module 3 lay waiting. I dressed quickly and brewed a cup of green tea, mindful that I needed to be fully present for the rehearsal I had scheduled with Larissa Green at 2 p.m. via video conference. My fingers trembled slightly as I set up my laptop camera. Years of hiding had made me cautious about visibility, but this time I was eager to be seen on my own terms. By mid-morning, I had polished the narrative flow of my anecdote. The way my grandmother had discovered the power of a precise thesis statement when teaching literature to displaced scholars in 1954, how that lesson had ultimately shaped my own teaching philosophy. I reviewed each slide's speaker notes, ensuring my pacing allowed for natural pauses and opportunities for student interaction. As I practiced aloud, I realized my voice felt stronger, more confident than at any point before. The self-doubt that once echoed in my head had been replaced by a quiet assurance born of evidence. My work mattered, and others wanted to learn from me. At exactly 2 p.m., my screen lit up with Larissa's warm smile and Grant Whitman's nod of encouragement. "Good afternoon, Ethan," Larissa greeted me. "We're excited to see the Module 3 draft." I took a breath and began. Slide by slide, I walked them through the key concepts: how to frame a thesis as an argumentative claim, how to ground it in specific evidence, and how to anticipate counter-arguments. I demonstrated interactive exercises that invited learners to transform broad prompts, such as the role of technology in society, into focused, debatable thesis statements. Larissa interjected with thoughtful questions about pacing and visual consistency, while Grant noted potential corporate compliance language for newer partnerships. I incorporated their feedback in real time, adjusting slide background slightly for better contrast, and flagging an additional example from a sociology journal to diversify the disciplinary perspective. By the end of the hour, we had refined every slide's content and choreography. Larissa leaned closer to her webcam. "This is exceptional, Ethan. Your personal story and scholarly rigor blend seamlessly. We'll move forward with these slides for the live launch next Wednesday evening." Grant added, "Please send the final files by this Friday, and let's coordinate promotion materials by early next week." I nodded, heart buoyant. "Thank you both. I'll finalize and deliver by end of day Friday." After the call ended, I exhaled fully for the first time all day. The actual webinar launch felt just around the corner, and I knew the culmination of all my efforts, legal battles, tutoring sessions, late-night revisions would come to fruition once more. But even beyond that professional milestone, I recognized how profoundly this journey had reshaped me. No longer was I the invisible sibling blamed for every mishap. I was a recognized educator, a partner in a respected academy. That afternoon, I answered an unexpected email from Educators Journal. They wanted to extend my article into a feature-length interview for their next quarterly issue. They asked for my reflections on the intersection of intellectual property rights and educational innovation. I accepted eagerly, planning to weave in anecdotes from my negotiation with ProsePath and the emotional impact of reclaiming my grandmother's legacy. The call was scheduled for the following week, and already I felt exhilarated at the prospect of sharing my story with a broader professional community. As evening approached, I walked down to the Riverwalk once again, notebook in hand. I paused at a stone bench overlooking the water and drafted a blog post titled "From Conflict to Collaboration: Lessons in Educational Entrepreneurship." I outlined sections on identifying stolen content, the value of thorough documentation, the importance of professional negotiation, and the ultimate reward of shared success. Each bullet felt like both a guide for others and a marker of how far I had come. Back in room 105, I organized my growing collection of mementos. The signed licensing summary, the green receipt card, my grandmother's faded portrait, and now my Educator's Journal invitation, all pinned in deliberate order. I placed a new sticky note beneath them. Module 3 launch next Wednesday. Stay present. That night, I lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling as fireflies of street lamplight wavered through the curtains. I reflected on the journey, the family that tried to erase me, the bus rides that carried me toward anonymity, the first hesitant tutoring sessions, and the legal battles that restored my name. With each milestone, I had grown stronger, wiser, and more committed to uplifting others. As sleep claimed me, I felt a profound sense of purpose. The next chapter awaited, one where my voice would continue to guide learners and where my own narrative, once suppressed, would stand as testament to the power of persistence and integrity. The morning light inched through the narrow gap in the curtains of room 105, and I woke feeling a mixture of anticipation and grounded calm. Today was the day I would finalize the launch plan for Module 3 and prepare for my video interview with Educators Journal. I brewed a pot of chamomile tea, letting its gentle aroma soothe my nerves as I cleared the desk of clutter. The slide deck for Module 3 lay open on my laptop, accompanied by my notebook full of scribbled interview questions and talking points. After a quick shower, hot water this time, steady and comforting, I dressed in a button-down shirt and dark chinos, opting for a look both professional and approachable. I pinned a small lapel microphone to my collar, knowing the interview would be recorded via video call. Before leaving the room, I paused at the wall of mementos, the signed licensing summary from ProsePath, the green return receipt card, my grandmother's portrait, and the sticky note that read, Module 3 launch, Wednesday at 7 p.m. I drew in a slow breath and whispered, "You've got this, Grandma," tapping her photo for luck. I set up my laptop on the motel desk, positioned to capture both my face and a glimpse of the wall behind me. The email from Educators Journal had specified a 10:30 a.m. start time. Exactly at 10:20, I logged into the call, greeted by the bright face of Ms. Diane Holloway, the journal's senior editor. Behind her was a bookshelf crammed with educational tomes. "Good morning, Ethan," she said warmly. "Thank you for making time today. We're excited to hear more about your journey and expertise." I took a sip of tea and smiled. "Thank you, Diane." I'm honored to share my experiences. Over the next hour, we discussed everything from my initial days as a college tutor, when I earned just $10 an hour helping classmates dissect literary passages, to the moment I discovered prose paths.
Unauthorized use of my curriculum.
I recounted the tension of drafting that first cease and desist letter and the relief of negotiating a fair licensing agreement. Diane listened intently, occasionally typing notes. She asked insightful questions. How did reclaiming your materials change your teaching philosophy? And what advice do you have for educators safeguarding their intellectual property? I offered candid reflections. Document every step of your creative process, draft dates, email confirmations, student feedback. If you ever need to prove ownership, those records become your strongest allies. As the interview wrapped up at 11:30, Diane thanked me and promised an early draft of the feature for my review. I exhaled deeply, exhilarated by the opportunity to reach a national audience. My grandmother's portrait seemed to glow in silent approval. Next, I shifted focus back to Module 3. I reviewed the final 25 slides, ensuring consistency of design, clarity of examples, and pacing notes in the speaker's script. I embedded a short video clip demonstrating thesis writing techniques, which I had recorded in the library's media room. Satisfied, I exported the file to the Prose Path Partner Portal, hitting Submit at 1 p.m. A confirmation message appeared. Module 3 materials received. "Thank you, Ethan." I allowed myself a small, triumphant smile. That afternoon, I prepared promotional blurbs for social media. I drafted concise captions. Excited to guide you through thesis craft and creation, Module 3 now live on ProsePath Academy. Dive in tonight at 7 for our first live Q&A session. I scheduled posts for ProsePath's Twitter and LinkedIn pages, selecting a hero image featuring a snapshot of my grandmother's handwritten journal alongside the Module 3 title slide. Then I turned to my personal blog, composing a post about the upcoming Module 3 launch and linking to the Educator's Journal feature once published. By early evening, I felt both exhilarated and exhausted in the best possible way. I grabbed a light dinner, a turkey wrap and side salad, and returned to the motel. At exactly 6:30, I logged into the Prose Path webinar platform to run a final sound and slide check. The interface showed 120 registered attendees, up from 50 for Module 1. My heart hummed with pride. At 7 p.m., I went live. My webcam lit my face against the backdrop of my modest setup, laptop, notebook, and that wall of personal milestones. I delivered the seminar with confidence, guiding learners through crafting clear, compelling thesis statements. Post-launch surveys flooded in with praise and constructive feedback. Best module yet. And the anecdotes added real depth. And I felt that familiar spark of connection lighting every corner of my being. As the session concluded at 8:30, I closed the platform and leaned back in my chair. The motel room was quiet except for the distant hum of traffic. I looked around at the walls I had once thought confining. Now they bore witness to my transformation. I'd gone from erased sibling to empowered educator, from unseen tutor to celebrated content partner. And through it all, every document, every slide, every testimonial stood as proof that perseverance, integrity, and self-belief can reclaim even the most stolen of dreams. Tonight, I slept with that knowledge as my lullaby, and tomorrow I would continue building on this hard-won success. The morning after the Module 3 launch, I awoke to a flurry of notifications. My phone buzzed softly on the nightstand, and as I reached for it, I realized I was no longer in the musty motel room, but in a modest studio apartment overlooking a small park. Only a few days had passed since I signed the lease, yet every corner now felt like a canvas for my new life. I had traded the sagging bed in room 105 for a crisp, comfortable mattress, and the peeling walls for fresh paint in a calming shade of sage. Above my makeshift desk, a simple, reclaimed wood tabletop, I had pinned the printed Educator's Journal feature, the Prose Path licensing summary, and my grandmother's black and white photograph, all held in place by a single antique clip she once used for her lesson plans. I stretched and brewed a pot of jasmine tea, inhaling its fragrant steam as I reviewed the day's agenda. First on the list was drafting the announcement for the Barbara Wellingham Scholarship Fund, which I had established in my grandmother's honor to support underprivileged students preparing for college entrance exams. The fund's initial endowment had come from a handful of generous contributions, former students, community members, and a small grant from a local education non-profit, all inspired by my online story of reclaiming intellectual property and teaching with integrity. I opened my laptop and crafted a heartfelt post. In memory of my grandmother, Barbara Wellingham, whose lifelong commitment to teaching changed countless lives, I am proud to launch the inaugural scholarship to support 10 talented students who lack
the resources to afford test preparation.
Eligible applicants will submit a one-page essay on how education has transformed their community. Applications open today and will be accepted through the end of next month. I formatted the announcement with a tender photograph of my grandmother standing before a chalkboard, chalk in hand and eyes alight with purpose. Hitting publish felt like sending a beacon of hope out into the world. I shared the link on social media, the Prose Path Partner Portal, and the Educator's Journal Community Forum, inviting readers to apply, share, and support. As midday approached, I shifted gears to prepare for a one-on-one mentoring session with Daniel, a recent college graduate struggling to transition into his first job. He had reached out after reading my blog post about resilience and professional reinvention. We met at a cozy cafe near my apartment, where I sipped hot chocolate while we discussed his resume, job search strategies, and the importance of framing setbacks as learning experiences. Daniel listened intently as I shared my own story of losing everything and rebuilding from scratch. By the end of our time together, he had a revised cover letter that emphasized his adaptability and a clearer vision of his career path. As he thanked me, I felt the familiar warmth of purpose, the same conviction that had guided me through every tutorial, every legal battle, and every webinar. Back at home, I spent the afternoon reviewing scholarship applications that had already begun to trickle in. Each essay was a testament to perseverance: a high school senior tutoring younger siblings after school, a young immigrant volunteering to teach language classes, a foster youth determined to break the cycle through education. I made notes on promising candidates, considering how the scholarship committee, comprised of former students and local educators, should evaluate each submission. The scholarship was more than financial aid. It was a symbol that learning matters and that kindness fuels transformation. As evening descended, I hosted an informal online meetup for Prose Path students enrolled in Module 1 and Module 2. I appeared on screen from my apartment desk, the soft glow of a desk lamp illuminating my face and the neatly arranged certificates pinned behind me. Over 40 participants tuned in, representing diverse backgrounds from rural towns to metropolitan suburbs. We shared success stories. One attendee had improved her SAT reading score by over 200 points. Another had secured a full-ride scholarship to a state university. I facilitated breakout rooms for small group discussions, answering questions about writing strategies, study habits, and balancing academic goals with personal well-being. The sense of community was palpable. The chat overflowed with gratitude and encouragement. By the time we wrapped up, participants lingered in virtual lobbies, exchanging contact information and promising to stay connected. After logging off, I stepped onto my small balcony, inhaling the cool night air scented faintly with jasmine from a nearby garden. In the distance, the soft hum of city life mingled with chirping crickets. I looked at the wall beside my desk, now a vibrant tapestry of my journey, each document, each photograph, each sticky note telling a chapter of my story. No longer was I the erased sibling huddled in a guest room. I was an educator, a creator, a mentor, and a philanthropist. Tomorrow, I would finalize scholarship committee guidelines, follow up on my educator's journal feature edits, and begin drafting Module 4's content outline. But tonight, I allowed myself a moment of quiet triumph. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of gratitude settle in my chest. In reclaiming my past, I had forged a future defined not by absence, but by presence, by the lives I would touch, the minds I would guide, and the legacy of learning I would continue to build. I awoke with the sun's first rays filtering through the blinds of my cozy studio apartment, feeling a surge of purpose in my chest that outshone any morning alarm. Today was dedicated to two pivotal tasks: convening the scholarship committee to select the inaugural 10 recipients of the Barbara Wellingham Fund, and mapping out the core structure for Module 4, which I plan to title Argumentation and Persuasion, Crafting Compelling Proposals. After brewing a cup of mint tea, my personal ritual for focus, I reviewed the list of scholarship essays that had arrived overnight. Each page bore the quiet determination of young writers confronting adversity, a foster youth recounting how he tutored neighborhood children despite living in group homes, a first-generation college hopeful describing how her mother's factory job inspired her to pursue engineering, a refugee who taught himself English by annotating bilingual texts. I assembled a small virtual panel of former students, Marisol, Ravi, and Ariana, inviting them to join a video conference at 10 a.m. sharp. As I waited for their cameras to flicker to life, I reminded myself that this was more than a selection process. It was the culmination of my grandmother's legacy and my own journey from obscurity to empowerment. When everyone had joined, I opened the floor. Thank you all for being here. Our goal is to identify 10 applicants whose essays demonstrate both the transformative power of education and the resilience to leverage this scholarship fully. We spent the next 2 hours discussing each candidate's heartfelt stories, weighing their needs against their potential for impact. Marisol championed a student who had organized free tutoring sessions in her community. Ravi advocated for an applicant who dreamed of opening a mobile classroom in rural counties, and Ariana spoke passionately about supporting a single parent studying nursing. We laughed, nodded, and occasionally fell silent as we considered essays that made our own memories of struggle and triumph resurface. Finally, by consensus, We selected the 10 recipients whose essays resonated most deeply with our shared values. I drafted personalized acceptance emails on the spot, congratulating each winner and outlining next steps for disbursement and mentorship. The committee members expressed heartfelt thanks for including them in this process, and I felt a profound sense of closure and renewal, knowing that together we had ignited the spark of opportunity in 10 deserving lives. With the scholarship work complete by early afternoon, I turned to Module 4's blueprint. I cleared my desk of scholarship documents and opened my trusted notebook to a fresh page titled Module 4, Argumentation and Persuasion. From the pen flowed bullets outlining the module's structure. First, foundational theory, defining persuasion through ethos, pathos, and logos. Second, real-world applications, analyzing historic speeches and modern proposals. Third, hands-on practice, students drafting mock proposals for causes they care about. And fourth, peer review guidelines, teaching learners to critique respectfully and constructively. I paused to think of a compelling opening anecdote, the human touch that had become my signature. I recalled an evening years ago when I had drafted my grandmother's teaching grant application, her words grappling with scientific literacy among rural students, and how that document had secured vital funds for her program. I scribbled the anecdote in my own voice, imagining how it would draw learners into the art and ethics of persuasion. By late afternoon, I had sketched 20 slide titles and drafted speaker notes for each, interweaving historical examples from 19th century social reformers to 21st century social entrepreneurs. I translated these notes into the ProsePath template, importing hand-drawn diagrams to illustrate rhetorical appeals and layering interactive polling questions to engage live audiences. As evening set in, I stepped onto my balcony to survey the city lights, reflecting on the arc of my own transformation. From the cold walls of that guest room to the vibrant community of learners, from silent erasure by blood relations to a celebrated role as an educator and advocate, I had journeyed farther than I ever dared to hope. Below me, distant traffic hummed, and the soft glow of street lamps cast gentle patterns on the pavement. I thought of the Module 4 launch coming next month, of the scholarship winners who would begin their academic journeys in the fall, and of the countless students yet to discover their potential in my courses. With a renewed sense of mission, I returned indoors, brewed a final cup of chamomile, and sat at my desk reviewing the day's achievements. I added a new sticky note above my grandmother's photo. Module 4, draft complete, prepare to inspire. The soft buzz of the evening city was my lullaby as I closed my eyes, knowing that tomorrow would bring fresh opportunities to guide, to teach,
and to uplift.
In the silence of that moment, I felt more present than ever, more alive in my own story, a narrative I had not only reclaimed, but had rewritten with courage, compassion, and unshakable resolve. I woke on a Saturday morning to the comforting hush of my apartment, the distant hum of cars softened by the tall oaks outside the window, the gentle golden light dancing across my desk. Today I planned to consolidate everything I'd built, finalize Module 4 materials for ProsePath, distribute scholarship funds via the non-profit portal, and outline a personal reflection piece for Educator's Journal on lessons learned. But first, I brewed a strong pot of Earl Grey in honor of my grandmother, whose spirit still guided me with every sip. As I settled at my desk, I surveyed the wall of mementos that had grown over the past few months. In the top left corner hung the original photograph of my grandmother, chalk in hand before a blackboard. Below it were my signed licensing agreement, the green return receipt card from ProsPath, acceptance letters from scholarship recipients, and thank you notes from students whose lives had shifted because of our work together. I reached out and touched the frame, feeling the textured wood beneath my fingertips. Each artifact marked a milestone, from silent erasure in my family home to a thriving career rooted in integrity and compassion. I turned to my laptop and opened the ProsPath Partner Portal. Module 4's draft slides awaited final polish. I reviewed each of the 30 slides, honing transitions and verifying that interactive elements, live polls, breakout prompts, and real-time exercises were seamlessly embedded. As I clicked through, I imagined hundreds of learners clicking Join Webinar next Tuesday at 7 p.m., each eager to master persuasive writing. I added a brief animated transition between slides 10 and 11 to emphasize the shift from theory to practice and adjusted the speaker's notes to include a short case study of a student, Jasmine, a scholarship recipient, whose persuasive proposal
secured funding for a community garden.
By noon, I uploaded the finalized deck and received the confirmation banner, Module 4 materials approved and scheduled for launch. Next, I turned to the Barbara Wellingham Scholarship Fund portal, where the 10 recipients' accounts awaited disbursement. I clicked through each profile: Hannah, Diego, Amina, Luis, Sophia, Connor, Priya, Jamal, Estelle, and Naveen, verifying banking details and sending each scholarship check with a personalized note. Dear name, congratulations on being selected for the
inaugural Barbara Wellingham Scholarship.
I was deeply moved by your essay and proud to support your academic journey. Remember that education is both a tool and a bridge. Use it boldly. Warm regards, Ethan Mercer. 40 minutes later, all funds were on their way. I leaned back in my chair, feeling a profound sense of fulfillment in knowing these resources would empower 10 driven, deserving students to pursue their dreams. The final task of the day was drafting an essay for Educator's Journal, reflecting on how adversity had shaped my approach to teaching and entrepreneurship. I opened a new document and titled it Educator as Advocate: From Erasure to Empowerment. I wrote in a steady flow, weaving together personal anecdotes, from the night my sister blamed me for a technical glitch to the moment I reclaimed my work. Through legal action and lessons on resilience, ethical practice, and community building, I emphasized 4 core principles. 1. Document your journey. Keep meticulous records of creation dates, drafts, and feedback. 2. Stand firm on integrity. Approach disputes with professionalism and clarity of purpose. Moondram. Center. Compassion. Use your skills to uplift learners, especially those most in need. 4. Cultivate. Community. Collaboration turns individual triumphs into shared blessings. By the time I saved the draft at 5 p.m., the essay felt like a fitting capstone to my story, one that would reach beyond ProsPath's classrooms and inspire educators worldwide.
As dusk settled, I stepped out onto my small balcony with a mug of chamomile tea. The city lights flickered on, and the live oaks rustled in the gentle breeze.
I reflected on how far I'd come, from that guest room where I packed a bare minimum just to escape, to this apartment filled with purpose and proof of my worth. I thought of the students whose eyes brightened at each aha moment, of the scholarship winners whose dreams had been given wings, and of the educators reading my words, poised to assert their own rights and uplift their communities. In the distance, a train horn echoed, a reminder that life moves forward, carrying us toward new possibilities. I raised my mug in a silent toast to the grandmothers who believe in us, to the mentors who guide us, and to every one of us brave enough to reclaim our stories and share them with the world. Then I leaned back, closed my eyes, and let gratitude wash over me, knowing that the narrative I had written was not only my own, but a beacon for countless others yet to find their voice.